What's good? It's your brother YK the Truth, and in this video, I will be debunking Kurimeo's claim that the Native Americans were Hebrew. I will go over where they got this idea from. I will give you historical references and historical facts to why natives believe these things or was taught to believe these things. So stay tuned because it's about to get deep. Let's go. So Kurimeo's video start off with him referencing lies my teacher told me. Okay? And it goes over how the Native Americans were exterminated on a large scale. Hundreds of millions of natives were exterminated by these Europeans. So I am going to play this video. So let me play it as he played it, because it shouldn't have took 2 minutes and 35 seconds for you to prove that the Aboriginals are Hebrews. So let me play the video that you shared, and then I'm going to debunk you with that very video.
The colonists offered the Indians a toast to eternal friendship, whereupon the chief, his family, advisors, and 200 followers dropped dead of poison.
In mainstream history books, perhaps the most common description of American territory then is virgin land. In fact, notes historian Peter Jennings, it was widowed, horrific enough the Nazi ethnic cleansings in Europe during World War II. Leading American studies professor David Stannard notes it's dwarfed by, quote, far and away the most massive act of genocide in the history of the world. The death of 100 million indigenous people in the, quote, American Holocaust, some from disease, but also vast numbers from a deliberate policy aimed at wiping out the race that mainstream history books continue to pretend never happened. He notes when Heinrich Himmler called the final solution, quote, delousing, Himmler was only echoing the Pilgrim Army's rallying cry, nits make lice, nits being Indian babies. This was a map of Indian nations across the US. 80% of the first government's entire budget went on attacking existing Indian settlements to take their developed farmland. Settlers would most probably not have survived, writes Jennings, on their own. 95% of America's entire population was then wiped out. American Holocaust notes there is documented evidence of colonist leaders going town after town, deliberately killing all men, women and children. Yet school texts and history books remain silent. Orders came from the very top. Under the direct order of George Washington, at least 28 of 30 Seneca towns and all the towns of the Mohawk, Onondaga and Cayuga were simply obliterated. George Washington wrote the Indian country, quote, must be destroyed. Thomas Jefferson called to, quote, pursue Indians to extermination. Nobel Peace Prize winner Theodore Roosevelt called beneficial the eradication of the native race. Stannard notes genocide was official public policy. California Governor Peter Burnett in his 1851 message to the legislature.
Extermination must continue to be waged until the Indian becomes extinct.
Another governor issued the public proclamation to, quote, pursue, kill and destroy all Indians. A witness notes the ensuing bloodbaths practically wiped out the native race.
The whites shoot them down like wolves, men, women and children, wherever they could find them. This war of extermination against the Aborigines is tending to the final extinction of the race.
What reportedly saved the race from extinction was their use as slave labor.
So we seen a video, and it shows how the natives were slaughtered, and they literally wanted them to be exterminated, right? Exterminated. They wanted to exterminate the so-called indigenous people of America. And the reason why I'm saying so-called indigenous people of America is because he believes that the natives are Hebrews. These people cannot have their cake and eat it too. You can't be indigenous to America and be a lost tribe of Israel. Either you're from Israel or you're from America. That's the first thing. Now, it makes perfect sense. Let's read this. It says, others made the same plea to Charles V, though not always with the same humanitarian motives. The king was moved to pity, and there was also the highly practical consideration that the Indians were worthless as slaves and the Negroes extremely useful. See, the Indians were dying. They were dying. See, we can't continue to cherry pick what fits our little theory. See, this is going to be a real good video. Don't turn the channel. Don't turn the channel. You can't say that they were exterminated on a massive scale and then act like, so they was exterminated on a massive scale. Not only that, a lot of them was sent to the West.
Images of each other, so we don't learn that much that's new. If you look at Native American ancestry, we can find a bit more interesting patterns. We find more Native ancestry in the West and in the Southwest. And this is consistent with historical records that there were more Native Americans alive in these regions when slavery when African slavery was brought in. Because
not even in the South, where most of the cotton picking and everything that took place at, the low country, Georgia, Carolina, Alabama, Florida, the natives, it seems like everywhere the natives were, they were getting kicked out. They were getting the Trail of Tears. They had to go. They had to leave. So if they was leaving in these large, massive waves, who was working? Who was building America? Who? It was the African people, our African ancestors who built up America. Let's keep going. So now that we have the extermination part out the way, right? Let's get to his claim. He claims that the word Yahweh and Haya, you know how the natives be saying, Haya, 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 Haya. He see the similarities in Haya, and he thinks that they're talking about Yahweh. You get what I'm saying? So he's basically saying that the natives were praying to God, to Yahweh, when they were saying those things. But I'm going to break down the history of it. It's called the ghost dance. So I'm going to break down the ghost dance, but let's listen to Kurimeo make those claims. Let's go.
Hawa and Heya. Earlier form of Heya, Hawa. Heya, 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 Heya. Now sing with me. Heya, 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 Heya.
So let's break down this ghost dance. All right. The Haya, Haya, Haya. It's the Arapaho ghost dance, rekindling the human spirit. All right. And this is the translations. Now, what is the ghost dance about? Okay. The ghost dance was actually created to pray the white man out of existence.
Across the parched land known as the Great Basin, the flood of pioneers lured by gold encountered small bands of desert Indians. The Shoshone, Goshute, and the Paiutes were among the hunting and gathering tribes living by a precarious dependence on the cycles of nature.
We traveled in small bands, our people did. And we went where the food was plentiful. The boy never would say, okay, the grease brush, it's nice and yellow. The deer is fat. It is time for us to move. I was taught to talk to the plants and tell them what I needed them for before I replaced whatever I took from them with a small gift.
When I think back of what this land was like, it was a land of plenty. We had beautiful salmon trout that spawned up our river. We had deer, ducks, geese. You know, we had a way of life here.
It wasn't, remember, just gold. These guys came out here just for gold. They looked around and said, my God, there's also land. We're going to stay here. Nobody's claiming that it's just a bunch of Indians.
It was a real sad time in the life of the people here when we were so much in between cultures, from the traditional roaming ways to starting to be in one place. And it was a time when everybody was looking for hope for the future, you know, what was going to happen to us.
Man who works in soil cannot dream. And wisdom comes to us in dreams. Paiute medicine man.
We relied, as we had for millennium, on our traditional dreamers. Many of them envisioned an apocalypse that would miraculously rid our world of our white oppressor. Hundreds of native prophets began spreading messages of divine hope. The best-known movement, the ghost dance religion, was founded by a Paiute messiah known as Wovoka.
Wovoka was a combination, I think, of a traditional medicine man and Christianity.
And among the Paiutes, he was simply Old Man Jack Wilson. Some people called him Grandpa. He predicted dates when the sun would go into hiding. He predicted dates when the earth would shake. He preached the buffalo coming back and the whites disappearing. But yet again, he taught brotherhood, kindness, be kind to each other, work together.
I think it was something that we all needed at that time, because it was such a sad time. And I think it gave us strength.
Wovoka had been struck with a revelation from God. His vision for peace was carried through sacred dances based on a traditional Paiute round dance. It quickly spread to hundreds of desperate worshippers.
The ghost dance was in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, you know, California.
Images of each other, so we don't learn that much that's new. If you look at Native American ancestry, we can find a bit more interesting patterns. We find more Native ancestry in the West and in the Southwest.
It traveled so far and so fast.
Ghost dance camps sprang up, and thousands would gather and dance for days into trance and exhaustion. The government's fear of the ghost dance movement escalated when it reached the plains. As rumors spread that Lakota tribespeople were assembled, fear became obsession, and nearly 300 people were massacred by the United States Army at Wounded Knee in South Dakota. 27 men of the 7th Cavalry received the Medal of Honor for this massacre.
All right, this vibrant, energizing circle dance, often called We Circle Around, derives from the Arapaho Ghost Dance Uprising, a 19th century spirited revival religion by Wovoka. The ghost dance movement arose at a time when the Native American tribes of North America, after prolonged contact with the white man, immigrants, were losing touch with their traditions, their ancestors, and their close connection with nature. They were falling into alcohol addiction, crime, and breakdown of family and community structure. Okay? It was literally created to pray the white man away. It has nothing to do with Yahweh. Okay? It has nothing to do with Yahweh. All right? Because there's the translations. Not only that, I'm going to show you how the person who created the ghost dance, right, was a Christian.
Wovoka was a combination, I think, of a traditional medicine man and Christianity.
Who was Christianized. Okay, so now that you have a better understanding of the ghost dance, let's talk about where this idea of Native Americans being Hebrews actually derive. Okay, and I'm reading to you from a journal article, and it's some other kind of being and condition. The controversy in mid 17th century England over the peopling of ancient America. Okay, by Richard W. Cogley. Okay, in 1651, 2 years after the establishment of the Puritan Commonwealth in England, the Anglican controversialists Hammond and Strange wrote a rejoinder to a recent book by Thomas Thorogood, a Puritan minister in Norfolk. The issue dividing the two men was not the usual matter contested by the Anglicans and the Puritans in revolutionary England, the proper organization of church and state, but rather the possibility that Native Americans were descended from the 10 lost tribes of Israel, who had vanished from biblical history in the 8th century BCE. Thorogood's book, which had been published in London in 1650 under the rather misleading title of Irish in America, argued for the Indians' Israelite ancestry. Okay, so Thomas Thorogood was the first person to create this theory. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you why he created this theory. All right. All right. So here it goes right here. So let's go down. Thorogood was in contact with the Puritan missionary John Eliot, who had immigrated from England to the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1631, in accordance with the Puritan goal of converting the American Indians to the Christian faith. One of the strategies devised by the Puritan settler was to view the Indians as being descended from the ancient Israelites through the Christian messianic millenarian myth of the lost 10 tribes. You see that? Viewing the Indians in this religious light would make them more acceptable as human beings in general to the population of Puritan settlers. And with this purpose, the book was then written, first published in 1650. 1650. See, you got to understand the entire purpose of, well, I wouldn't say the entire purpose. I would say the excuse that these Europeans used to invade and colonize the Americas and go to Africa, and that was to turn these savages into Christian. All right. So let me show that. Let me speak on that as well. Let's go. So this is the doctrine of discovery. The bull stated that any land not inhabited by Christians was available to be discovered, claimed, and exploited by Christian rulers, and declared that the Catholic faith and the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, that the health of souls be cared for. See, let me explain something to you so-called Aboriginal people, right, is this. These Europeans did not have anything to give the natives. They did not have anything to really, they didn't have any real excuse to tell the people in Europe of why we're going to go and do these things to these human beings. So they had to come up with an idea of, let's go over there in the name of Jesus, in the name of religion. See, here's the thing, though, Aboriginal, Hebrew Aboriginals, right? It's this. You're praying to Yahweh, and in the Christian religion, they're praying to God. Y'all both praying to the same deity, and it did not stop the natives from being slaughtered by the Europeans. It didn't stop them from bringing us over here, and we still are Christians and so-called Hebrews today. It's no wonder, because the same trickery that the Europeans played on the Africans is the same thing that they played on the so-called indigenous people of America. So we see that Yahweh is not the Yahweh. It has nothing to do with Yahweh. It's just the similarity. That's it. We see words and we say, oh my God, they must be talking about Yahweh. No, bro. No. It's not the same. And that whole story was fabricated. It was fabricated about the natives being tribes of Israel. I proved it to you. And I had to make this short but brief video. And this is actually a part 1, because I was looking at this guy's video, Kurimeo, and I was just saying he got so much wrong, yo. For instance, he goes in these books and he cherry picks the information that says swarthy and this, and then when you go in that same book, you see the writers acknowledging that the Indians and the Negroes are not the same. They are not the same. And then he also made a claim that about the dark races of America and how nature made us all dark, failing to realize that just because a person is dark doesn't mean that they are the same genetically. It just means, I mean, if a white person got a tan and they was damn near brown, does that mean that they are us or we are them? We got to stop looking at skin color and thinking that, well, that's us. And then when you look at a lot of these Native Americans, these indigenous people, they don't look their features are not the same. They just have color. They have long noses. And then I actually showed you a video of the Native lady talking about it. And I showed you the clip of how, think about it. I'm going to show you something else that literally debunks the whole thing, right? Now, the lady was making a claim how those dances were passed on in the West. Pay attention. In the West, right? Historically, with the historical facts that we have, the natives were sent to the West. Let me show you. I have a migration based on a geneticist speak on how there was a massive migration from Africa via the slave trade.
Okay, so if we break things down by region, the most striking pattern we found was that individuals in the south of the US, African Americans in the south of the US, had a higher proportion of African ancestry compared to the north. A bit more interesting patterns. We find more native ancestry in the west and in the southwest. And this is consistent with historical records that there were more Native Americans alive in these regions. Okay, so if I break down this slave trade by regions within the US, so here I broke down the arrival place of enslaved individuals, across the coast here. So you have the north here in green, the Chesapeake Bay area. So this is near Washington, D.C. It's right at the border between the traditional north and south in the US. You have the south here, the Carolinas, and Georgia, and you have the Gulf states. And one thing you can see is that, well, firstly, there's approximately 400,000 individuals who were brought in and who survived the voyage. The vast majority of individuals were brought in the south or near the south.
And genetics was done to test the people in the West. And it all DNA backs up the history. So you can't deny the DNA if the DNA backs up the history, just like my people back up the history. I have my I took my ancestry. I know who my great grandparents are. They from Georgia. They from the Low Country. They not from the West. They not from, you know what I mean, in the 1800s. Very few of you can trace ancestry that's in the West if you're African American. So it's your brother YK the Truth, man. I just had to make this brief video. And this is part 1. There will be more. I'm out. Peace.